Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. We have Rochelle Prater with us today. How you doing, Rochelle?
I'm doing very well. How are you today, Cedric?
I'm doing quite well. Where are you these days?
I hail in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Wow. Okay, and what's the weather like there today?
It's very sunny, hot and muggy, but it's very nice today.
Oh, wow. And now, is this the year of the cicadas out there?
There was some news. I have not heard any as of
Okay.
yes.
Okay. And if you can explain to our viewers what it's like living in Cincinnati. I know some people, they think Ohio and they think Columbus or maybe even Cleveland, but Cincinnati is a little bit different. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So my personal experience with Cincinnati is that Cincinnati for me is the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm gonna be very transparent in what I mean by that. I'll start with the I like to end on a positive note, so I leave good for last. The bad is Cincinnati is in my opinion predominantly Black. However, there's a lot of disparities in Cincinnati. Cincinnati is home of P&G and General Electric aircraft engines. I think the major issue with Cincinnati is that it borders a lot on the haves and the have-nots.
Okay.
Experiences that I've worked with, been able to work with families in the Cincinnati proper area, and a lot of disparity. The ugly is that Cincinnati is one of those places that is not how you say I didn't get that good old Southern feeling that, hey, how you doing? People are very reserved. Is called and labeled a conservative city. I would agree with that perhaps. But it is a place that if you're not from here, it's a hard nut to crack, to say the least. Now, the good is Cincinnati is a wonderful place to raise a child. I know that sounds weird with all the things I just said, but what I'm saying is I think you get out of whatever you get out your results of what you put in are a result of who you are. And I know for me and my children, I was able to do very well as do the best that I could in bringing in other people's students as well. I love my young Black men. I have a son myself. And so I think that it goes without saying if you could be a part of the problem or you could be a part of the solution.
That's
and
right.
I consider myself being a part of the solution.
Without a doubt. So it sounds like you didn't actually grow up in Cincinnati. Where did you actually grow up at?
I'm actually from a little town west of Baton Rouge called Maringouin, Louisiana. I'm going to spell it because as we move on along in our conversation, you're going to want to know about Maringouin. It's
Okay.
Maringouin, and it's actually French for mosquito. In fact,
Wow.
the mosquito is our town's mascot, if you will. I know that's
Wow.
a little fact. You might have to answer that on Jeopardy one day, so pay attention.
Okay.
It's about 30 miles west of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is the capital of Louisiana.
Now, the mosquito is a very powerful member of the world society. I want to put that out in front. It's one of those organisms that if it didn't exist, the whole ecosystem on planet Earth would be different. Similar to the bumblebee and stuff like that. So there's a lot of significance in the mosquito, if that would be the best term to call it, being used as a representative of a place like Louisiana. When I think about Louisiana, I immediately think about rich history of our country that is not always well known. Can you tell us what it was like growing up in that part of Louisiana?
So one of the things I like to share with people, as we all know, or you may or may not be aware, Louisiana is shaped like a boot.
Okay.
So, but they're geographically and culturally, the high top part of the boot generally identified with the rest of the South in culture, in food, in heritage, and so forth. And
Okay.
for a reason, the lower half, which included where I'm from, as well as from Lake Charles to the west and New Orleans to the east, what I call a low quarter part um, of the state. Culture was different. The way that we interact, me growing up was different. You to the west, Lake Charles, Lafayette was Cajun country, Acadiana. And
Okay.
then to the east, side of the Mississippi River, if you would, you had the New Orleans side, and that, of course, the food and culture. Everybody know the infamous, famous New Orleans culture. So for me, I was literally on because I live right across the river from Baton Rouge. My family, we probably, I would say for the most part, we identify more with the Cajun side of Louisiana.
Okay.
Food, the culture, what they call a couchon de lait, which is where a lot of pork. My grandfather spoke the Creole, Cajun French. I did not pick it up, unfortunately. I wish I had now. Of course, I have a lot of regrets with that. But the cultures was different. But for me, I was from the little teeny town. I also, am very happy to report that I am a child of integration. So when I was in the 4th grade, my school was integrated. But up until that point, all of my teachers were my cousins, so I had that nurturing experience. The one of the cousins in the family, Hawkins One Stop Shop and Grocery Store, was owned by a cousin. It was a gas station. It was a grocery store. It was an entertainment center. It even had the little makeshift baseball field.
If I want to slow this down right now because
Okay.
what we're listening to is a visual of history that preceded where we are today in a climate where we talk about not a big enough presence in academia, not a big enough presence in business ownership, not a big enough presence in overall entrepreneurship. But what you're telling me is about a time when integration first happened, right? And at the time of that integration, you had cousins who were teachers and you had family members who were business owners in the community where you grew up. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. What was it like? What was it like for you when they integrated the schools? What was it like before and what was it like during?
So I would say it's funny that you asked that because I've been thinking a lot of memories, especially with COVID and so forth. So you reach back to, to think of Connor and general days to get me through my day. I remember it was not like people from, if you will, the North would think it was like for me growing up. It was so much fun. We had before pre-integration, we had an event. We had 2 schools in the general region. So I'm from Maryland, but I identify with Grove State and Rosedale, Louisiana. We were regional. We were Northern Iberville Parish. By the way, Louisiana have parishes versus counties.
Okay.
So state in the country that we have parishes. And that is due to probably the French and, Louisiana being held by the French and the Catholic religion. But I digress. We were blessed because community was the buzz. I mean, it was a thing I grew up went in as, and I know that's why I am who I am, but we had something called an opera. So an
Okay.
opera was something that was held once a year, and it was a small play, of course, and it included the elementary school as well as the high school students. And it was a production. We had costumes and so forth and so on. It was just wonderful. The other thing that was a beautiful thing about community is, as I said, we had the baseball games at Cutting, uh, Burnett Hawkins on the Hawkins One Stop Entertainment Center.
Right.
We did our own thing and we were just fine. I tell people all the time. So I don't want to digress. So that was the good times. Then in my fourth grade year was the, we began to prepare for the be integrated. And so
Mhm.
it didn't actually happen that we started going to classes together until the fifth grade. So that the way that they did it in my community is the white people group, because I don't believe people are white or black. We are in groups. So the white people group actually came, the elementary school came into the black school, and then the black people group of the high school went to the white school. And that's how it worked. So I ended up going through education like that, graduated from 8th grade from the black school, and then went to high school to the then white school and graduated from the white school.
Okay.
You asked me what was good, then you asked me what was bad.
Well, go ahead. Well, I was gonna say, I just want to know about the experience, and what you're saying right now is very informative. So please do keep going.
Okay. So my life is such that is a I the education was one thing, and then my spiritual and church life was another thing. I have to distinguish that because I grew
Why?
up Catholic. I grew up Catholic, so I went to church my whole entire life with white people,
Okay.
and that's a different experience. So, but the school life was interesting because I remember when I'm gonna stay there for a minute. When the white kids came, the white people group came to our school, they refused to eat the food in the cafeteria, so they would pack their lunch, which was just mind blowing to me as an adult as I think of that, because probably in most cases, in many cases, I'm sure somebody black fixed the food anyway. So anyway, mind blown. That's how I think. But so that kind of, as a kid, that I was like, gee, our food not good enough or whatever. So they tried their best they were very resistant, if you will. And we, as the people we are, we were open arms. I don't recall any drama on the high school or the elementary school. I'm not sure if I'm not going to say there wasn't, but in my memory, that was not a thing.
Okay.
Probably because I was able to be only the addition of the white people group kids was the only thing that I had to deal with, because I was in my own element already being at the school.
Right.
Now, let me move to the church, because that's an entirely different thing. I grew up Catholic. I was a black Catholic. My mother and father, Thomas and Elizabeth Sanders, had 9 children. And I was number 9 of 9. They only had 8 children living at a time, because I had a brother that drowned 2 years prior to my birth. The significance of this is that the Catholic faith requires you to raise your children Catholic. And so my mother was Baptist, but my father was Catholic. So I was raised Catholic. And it was very traumatic for me. And I'm one of those people who I tend to embody, even as a child. I just been wired this way, and question why people are the way they are. Unfortunately, and you can hear my voice shake because I'm still kind of emotional about this. The black sit on one side and the white sit on the other side
At church.
at church.
So let me, we have a comment in the audience here, and DeMonte Howard says, I wonder were some of these the same children you went to church with the same children, white children who were discriminating at school? Was that the case?
That absolutely was DeMonte, and that's where my spirit began to be bothered because the other thing I didn't mention was at the all black school, when we were just separate, and even when, I don't know, we would have catechism, and my catechism, which is like a Bible study, weekly Bible study, was delivered by a cousin, of course. And then for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe this has been, we didn't call it vacation Bible school back then, but in the summertime, we would come together for 2 weeks, and the black and the white would go to this event together. But I'm hesitant to say what is it. I remember us like playing and interacting together, but then after that event was over, the white people group went to their place and the black people went to their place. So I don't have a real clear memory of what did occur. I just know every summer we would have vacation Bible study together. But DeMonte, you are absolutely right. It was very painful. And the older I got, I actually left the Catholic Church when I was like 22 years old because I had I was exposed to other religions, the Protestant church. And I used to go to church with my mother at the Baptist church anyway. But I always wondered, how could an individual, a man of the cloth, stand in front of a congregation and say to the congregation, Jesus loves you. Continue with your teaching, and you're able to deliver a message with the church separated. For me, that didn't make sense. It was hypocritical.
Right.
So that hypocritical piece was actually one of the pieces. When I was 14, I made my confirmation in the Catholic Church. There are what they call sacraments. At birth, you make your first communion around 6 years old, I think, and then at 14 you do something called a confirmation. So by that time, shortly right after I begin to get more mature in my thinking and courageous and questioning. And I remember going to, because my mother didn't go to do all of these things, and I remember asking the priest one time when I went to confession. I asked him, why do I have to come to you to tell you what I did or whatever? And I will tell you, I don't remember the exact response. However, whatever it was, I never went back. It just, to me, other people were able to talk directly to God and have conversations and so forth. I was like, nah, that wasn't good enough. So that began my journey to step away from the Catholic faith.
Wow. I want to talk about where you went from there. At what point in age did you leave Louisiana? But before we move on, Yolanda Riley says there's no line drawn with discrimination. My daughter goes to Catholic school, and parents will pray with us, and then school meetings on the direction of the school talk about excluding certain populations of people. And so that shows you that what you were experiencing then still occurs to this day. And so there is growth to be had when we talk about true integration, and when we talk about true spirituality in these buildings where we know that the people are the church. There remains a call to action for us to truly embrace each other across cultural lines. Now, what were some of the early lessons that you instilled in your daughter Miska that may have contributed to her being a leader that she is today?
That's a great question. And I say that because As you may know, there are only two HBCUs in the state of Ohio, Central State and um, Wilberforce.
Okay.
And Miska actually had the opportunity to, one of my employments were with a program called Gear Up, and it exposed, and I'm not going to use the labels that people use, but it was a grant funded program through the U.S. Department of Education that was in two CPS schools at the time. And I had the pleasure of and the opportunity to expose students from the greatest, well, from those two schools to college tours. And I took them down to Tennessee. I took them to Kentucky State, Tennessee State, Knoxville College, and Fisk University. And Miska, I took Miska on one of those tours with me. I am a proponent of HBCU. I tell parents all the time that a child of color education experience at a HBCU is something that money can't buy. And what I mean by that is we do suffer from PTSS, as Dr. Joyce DeGruy states. She's the renowned psychologist that has a program out there called post-traumatic slave syndrome. So it's important when we, after you finish your undergrad, to me, I call it like a hallelujah moment, because you guys being integrated and being in school, and you know, not all instructors at these schools have issues with racism or race, but some do. What they call it bias, implicit bias is a thing, it's real. Some people just don't realize that. So kids going to HBCU, if I had the resources, every Black male in America would go on my dime at least 1 year to HBCU.
Wow.
Miska went, and when Miska went, what came out of her mouth after being there a week was just complete transformation, and she was transformed. Same Jeremy. Jeremy went to FAMU in Florida, and he went.
Hold on.
Okay.
Tell the people who Jeremy is.
Okay, so Jeremy, I have two kids. My daughter Miska. Miska went to Wynwood actually with Cedric. Miska actually was unsure where she wanted to go to school. She was leaning toward HBCU. She ended up going to Fisk. She got an undergrad in psychology, and she got her doctorate, PsyD, in psychology at Atlas School of Professional Psychology, which is a social justice institute. My son Jeremy is a product of Wynwood High School, and what's interesting about Jeremy, and what I want to share with everybody, I'm very proud. Jeremy kind of suffered a little bit with self-esteem because his best friend was a football jock.
Okay.
Jeremy was in the choir and he played the violin. He was a chunky person. It took him a while to come. So he suffered with self-esteem. It could be difficult in high school for a Black male if you're doing well academically and you're doing what you're supposed to. So it was my intention for him to go somewhere. So he ended up getting a scholarship to go to FAMU. Okay. And when he went to FAMU, words cannot express the transformation. I'm talking within weeks.
Wow.
He actually wrote me 2 letters and mailed them to me in an envelope.
Right.
In 2011. That said, "Mommy, thank you so much.
Right.
It's changed my life."
Right.
So,
with this, well, first of all, this is making me feel kind of emotional because not only did you grow up with a very essential cultural experience in Louisiana where your people were teachers, but you grew up to put your children in a situation to experience the same cultivation that you did. And, you know, sometimes, and I'm sure right now in America, there are millions, at least several million young people in America who walking around and going back and forth to the corner store or the municipalities in their neighborhood, and they're thinking, you know, Black people are cool, they're great, but I don't see very much positivity happening with them. I want to be the one person that does something positive. I think that narrative right there is happening all across America. But what you're talking about is the fact that there are places in America, one of them being HBCUs, where Black people, people of color, or however you would like to term this rich culture, is a collective of people doing extremely positive things, extremely motivational things, and rubbing off on one another in a very great way.
That's correct.
So, you know, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to a walking history book right now. It's a book that everybody needs to be familiar with, and it goes by the title of Rochelle S. Prater. She's given us history today about integration, what life was like before it, and what life was like after it. Being a mother through the decades and being an advocate in the community for what we really need to do as a community. And so if you have not already, I'd like for you to share this stream. I'd like for you to subscribe to America's Next Motivator and tell a friend that we're having a very important conversation today. We'll be right back with Ms. Prater after this brief message. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by Cedric Riley, sponsored by our good friends at 4D Healthware. And we're back. So how you feeling, Ms. Prater?
I feel awesome.
You know,
very, very happy to have the opportunity to share my story.
Without a doubt, you know, it's habit at this time to talk to my elders as Mr. or Mrs. But you know, she does not need that patronage because she's a queen all by herself. I want to let our viewership out there know that it's very important to sit at the feet of those who have grown before you and those who have lived life before you, because they have much wisdom. And this wisdom exists in your families, whether it's an auntie, whether it's your mother, whether it's your grandmother, your cousin, an older sister who you might not have had a conversation with. There is history and there is story and information in our families that we need to tap into. And that's what we're doing today. Now, Ms. Prater, can you talk to me a little bit about what you decided to do after you moved to Cincinnati? What was the next step for you?
So I actually ended up in Cincinnati as a result of a life-changing automobile accident. Accident in 1990, where I suffered. Even today, I have ammunition. What do you call it when you can't remember? I can't think of the word now. See, but
okay. You're still impacted though.
Yeah, I had a head injury.
Okay.
So I was. I don't recall what exactly happened with the accident, nor do I recall. It happened on December the 18th, 1990. And I do not recall anything until the morning of December 25th, 1990. Wow. And so I ended up having to retire on disability. And rather than returning to Louisiana, for both my physical, my spiritual, and emotional health, I decided to come to Cincinnati because I have a sister here that lives in Forest Park, Ohio.
Okay.
So I came here and I stayed. So that's what brought me here, and I ended up being retired for. I didn't come to Cincinnati until 1992. However,
Mhm.
amnesia is what I had. Amnesia about the accident.
Okay.
And so I was retired on Social Security disability for 8 years, and I actually ended up going back to, if you will, work. Someone had approached me several times requesting that I come and tutor at uh, what they call non-traditional students, adult students, and so forth at Cincinnati State. I kept telling myself, no, 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 I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that.
Right.
But they convinced me, and I started 6 hours a week. And ever since that, I've been working in college access in
Mhm.
trio programs that have been sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education grant-funded programs up until September of 2018. I've been doing that.
Okay.
From the kids, from those students who were non-traditional, moved into Gear Up, which was kids from 5th grade to high school. Then I moved into Veterans Upper Bound, working with adults, and I loved every minute. It has made me who I am today. I literally benefited way more than what I gave. I absolutely loved every minute of that.
Wow. So you're what I would call a community builder, and you've been into that lane for some years now, and
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on a platform, because you found another way to build your community, and it involved discovering the heritage of your people. Can you talk to us about that?
Okay, so I let me see. In April of 2016, I discovered that I am a descendant of those enslaved ancestors, enslaved by Maryland Jesuits, priests who sold 272 enslaved folks so that they could keep then Georgetown College open and make it what it is today, Georgetown University, all
What?
because of my family.
Wow. So to be clear, in order for them to keep the property at that time, they sold 272 slaves, and those slaves were your family, and the profits from selling those slaves benefited what is now, or contributed to what is now, Georgetown University.
That is correct.
Absolutely incredible. Now, what happened after? How did you discover that?
So actually myself, Miska, and my family was flying out to California for my aunt's birthday. And I was looking at my phone at Facebook, and one of my cousins in Grove State, Maryland, is the content uh, editor for a page, several pages on Facebook, and she was giving prompts to cousin Maxine Crump, who Georgetown had did an article on the discovery, and they said who it was. Maxine, I knew Maxine Crump was my cousin by the Crump, but I did not know she was a cousin through the Hawkins.
Okay.
So I looked at it. I didn't embody it. I came back home. I embodied it, and I looked at our ancestry, and that's where I saw that they featured on that article a headstone of Neely Harkins. And Neely Harkins, I looked at my sister and I do research on ancestry, and I looked at my tree and I saw that Neely was actually the oldest brother sibling of my great grandfather. It was that close. I didn't know about this. Now let me be clear.
Okay.
His name was Jackson Harkins, and Jackson was actually 3 years old when the sale was done, when they bought him from Maryland to Louisiana.
Wow. Wow. how did that impact you to find out that information? First of all, that it's not a myth that you came from a lineage of slavery. That's first of all. And then after that, to be able to discover a pathway, a journey that your family members as slaves were a part of. How did that make you feel once you discovered that?
Um, it was, it's now 4 years. So it was a very dynamic process of emotions, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. On May 19th, I actually, article was published by New York Times. I did an interview with Rachel Swans. So my thoughts are there. For the most part, I arrived, I landed in a place of honor,
Mm-hmm.
feeling like, okay, like I literally, at the time I was dealing with having had so much loss, because I was regretful that my family was, my father died in '04. My last uncle probably died like in 14. We were that close to having been able to discuss this. I like what you said about sitting at the feet of your elders because we don't have time. I want to echo that, and I want you to make that a real point during this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Do not wait to capture that information. I will share with Cedric a questions. We partner with the organization called Georgetown Memory Project. They were the reason how we found out about ourselves. And they partner with the New England Historical Society, and they have these questions that you do for oral history. So I will provide Cedric with a copy of the document of the whole oral history. And I would say when you talk to your elders, don't come at your elders about tell me what it was like or whatever, or either tell me about what do you know, because this is a very painful. That's why we knew nothing about it. Slavery, we have to understand, even with roots having happened, right? Back in the day, you would think that they would have opened the door to be able to talk about it. I actually asked the question to my father, and at the time his aunt. So my great aunt was living. They didn't respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
Something that older people want to talk about it for whatever reason. So you have to be very cautious about how you approach people about that. So when I found out about it, though, eventually landed at a place of being grateful, and I literally made a list of some things that I wanted to come at it was, believe it or not, anger was never one of them. I have no idea why that emotion. Disappointment was the major one.
Right.
But at the same time, we live in America. We are people of color. We all think in our mind, gee, we know we came from slave, but we don't know nothing about them.
Right.
We were blessed, very blessed, that they were held by the Catholic faith community, because Catholics are meticulous about everything. There's something like I share with you about the sacraments. The enslaved people had their birth. They had their not confirmation, but they had their marriages, and they had their deaths for the most part.
Right. Now, did this lead to you also discovering that your family was larger than you thought it was?
It absolutely did.
Okay.
And that was the blessing too. Thank you for reminding me. Because I had so much loss, I was feeling like everybody was dying away from me. And as a result of this, I labeled this as I've won the lottery.
Wow.
The sense of money, people, please understand that. In the sense of I have family that I didn't know anything about.
But
And
how many family members did you discover as a result of this research?
right now, and I'm using when I say family, whether I can prove it or not, or whether we connected, but from this being discovered today, I think the number is like 6,000.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a website called the Georgetown Memory Project. They have a running total on their page. How many descendants have been found?
Wow. You see, now the reason why that's a very important thing is because I know for myself that there are a lot of people out here in America that feel like that they have a small family, and what ends up happening a lot of the time is when you go through adversities in life, or when life gets challenging and you're trying to stay afloat and stuff like that, you start feeling like you having a identity crisis about who you really are, or you feel like your roots not deep enough, because here you are trying to be like this one and trying to be like that one and trying to keep up with this one and trying to keep up with that one. And we don't too often we don't do the work of discovering the bigger picture. We don't do the ancestral work of finding out who we are connected to. And in your case, you discovered that there's up to 6,000 people that you need to account for when you think about your identity.
Absolutely.
Wow. Now,
Go ahead.
now, is there any sort of a name for this diaspora? Did you guys begin to identify?
So the name that we gave, and this particular name came out the information we had at the time, and we are very blessed to have a relative who was a former in leadership at the Kellogg Foundation. And his name is Joseph Stewart, and cousin Bo, and some other members of the family formed a organization called the GU 272 Descendants Association.
Okay. Wow.
We
So you guys
went,
understand.
yeah,
Okay.
we went with that, and I will tell you, I do want to do a caveat to the 272, because research has shown that the number actually came up to be like 314. However, that number of 272 in some cases, that came from on the agreement. You can look at this on the slavery archive at georgetown.edu. Some of the enslaved people that were listed on that article of agreements that was signed, by the way, on June 19th, 1838, some of those people did not go, because what they did, they came the meeting of the minds, sit down, did a handshake. By the way, the bishop, the priest that did it name was Jesuit priest named Thomas Mulledy, and he sold the enslaved ancestors to Henry Johnson, who was a former governor of Louisiana. He was in Congress at the time, as well as a Dr. Jesse Beatty. Those two did the contract. However, some of the enslaved people actually ended up going to a third person in Louisiana by the name of last name Thibodeau. And he was a governor prior to Henry Johnson. But I say that because I am happy to report that actually I want to step back a couple of steps.
Okay.
Important to note, I always give prompt to these young people. I didn't write their name down, but I want to share with them. I always thank them. In 2015, when Michael Brown Jr. was killed, we had a lot of protests and demonstrations across the nation at higher education institutes. There was a group of young people at Georgetown University that did a sit-in protest the Jesuits having owned slaves. A lot of people didn't know about this. This alumni member by a gentleman by the name of Richard Cellini, who was a former he was very heavily involved in an alumni called down to Georgetown to see what was going on. Richard says that he had heard that it was like an urban myth on the campus about this sale and having had slaves, period. As a result, Richard felt that it was so wrong, he formed a nonprofit and hired 11 genealogists. Those genealogists, one of them name was Judy Riffle in Louisiana, and Judy got in touch with Maxine. Maxine, my cousin Maxine, is also a journalist in Louisiana. So that's how they found us. But I want to highlight the power of the young people. Because had it not been for these young folks, and I'm not calling them kids, these young men and women, bringing this to the light, this would have got buried again.
Right. Now, I want to commend as well the young people who initiated the research that led to this dramatic discovery. And I want to know, where are you all today with this? Because this is setting a precedent and it's setting an example for what everybody should be doing as far as understanding your lineage and then taking action-oriented steps to get to a place of resolution. Where are you all today with this discovery of GU 272?
Okay, so one of the things happened again. This was not because of us. This was one of the demands of the students, but it impacted us. Building where Thomas Motherley's name stood was removed in 2017.
Okay, wow.
It was removed and replaced by Isaac Hawkins Hall.
Wow.
And there was another priest, and McSherry, no, I can't remember his name. I don't want to quote it. But another priest that was also involved, and they put the name of a nun who educated Black children, and I forget her name. And I want to do better by that because I don't want it to make it like I'm just care about what happened in my family. But there were two names that were removed and replaced by two people. One was the enslaved. Isaac Hawkins is my great-great-great-grandfather.
Wow.
And his name was placed there. Let me be clear. His name is symbolic of every enslaved American in this country. Okay. Wow. Because his name was only chosen because his name was the first on that list I talked about, the agreement. The Articles of Agreement. So his name was the one that was chosen first. Not because it's necessarily anything special other than that, but it's symbolic of all of them where you had an enslaver name removed and replaced by an enslaved individual. That didn't get any public attention, but I want to be clear about this stuff. Certain things don't need to be made public because you have issues with people right now with making things right. The important thing is that truth is at the edge of everything. And that leads me to the answer to your question. What we're doing is, besides the GU2 Descendants Association, which is a membership association that's open up to anybody, even non-descendants can partner with us as well, is more of a membership organization. However, there is on the table a proposal for the GU 272 Foundation. And the foundation will be an organization where a foundation to benefit the Kellogg, in partnership with the Kellogg Foundation, Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation effort that they do. And the purpose is to bring about racial healing and of course, get the truth out, as well as do transformative work. Right. So instead of, and by the way, that would include $1 billion endowment with
say that again?
$1 billion endowment with perpetuity for 200 years.
$1 billion endowment with perpetuity for 200 years.
Correct.
I want to say that this is one of the most important stories going on in America right now. This is one of the prime examples of the work that we need to do as a people, the work that our elders need to do to trace back their roots, because they know much better than some of the youngest of us, let's say 17 years old, who might be going through a sense of cultural identity. Our elders are in a prime position to say, well, I do remember great auntie so-and-so, and I do remember great uncle so-and-so, and I can start there, even though you can't because you're 17 years old. But it's your generation who has a power of discovery right now that we do not want to miss out on. The other thing I notice is that, there are a lot of people who talk about the concept of reparations, but there are not very many people who discuss the diligent amount of research, the possibility of discovery, and the reality that without anger, without slander, without libel, and with true, pure facts, that we can receive a formidable level of justice. Can you talk about that?
So there is a effort out there. I think it was formed actually in 2016 called the University Studying Slavery Consortium. And here in Cincinnati last year in October, that event, which occurs both semesters at some institution of higher learning, was hosted by Xavier University as well as UC, University of Cincinnati. And I actually participated on a panel that was entitled 40 Acres and a Myth. And it had to do with reparations. And so I will tell you that our organization, we don't talk in terms of reparation. And it was kind of birthed out of this. You asked me, what did I think when I first heard this? And I got some notes here. I'm going to read it verbatim. And then I'm going to tell you how it fits in with what you just asked. I made some notes to myself in April of 2016. And I said that I wanted to see reconcile, empowerment, and do it holistically. And I said at some point, I would like to see the descendants of the slave owners as well as the descendants of the enslaved people to meet. Also, I wanted to have the descendants gather. I wanted to do a workshop called Undoing Racism. The People's Institute for Survival and Beyond do a workshop called Undoing Racism. I wanted to add some activities of social inclusion, career development, career and college readiness, financial literacy, career aspiration with education options and financing. That would be under career development. I would like to make certain that there is special emphasis on military and veteran families. I want to make sure that all individuals get a passport. I wanted a partnership with Ancestry.com, conversion and preservation of the graves and different sites where our ancestors have been discovered, as well as pictures and film. And I will tell you that that's a thing already, because the African American Museum